And Laura, I will hand it to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
You. Welcome to day one in the virtual world in coding. I am going to pop in every other week or so just to stay kind of connected to you guys and just let you know what's happening on the career coaching side and kind of keep that bug going in your ear. That way you don't get to the end and go, oh, I forgot all about that. I did post, so I asked a lot of you when you would like to meet for group coaching. So thanks to everyone who responded. And then I replied in the career coaching channel with upcoming dates. So again, for anybody I didn't meet at the orientation, my name is Laura Thorne and I'm the career coach. I have been doing this with Careers in Code since cohort 2. And my role is to help you. It's called Careers in Code. So the career part of my job is to help you with your resume, networking, cover letter, just kind of thinking about what it is you want to do. If you want to get into a specific field and talk through that, working through the other sidebar things like imposter syndrome and trying to figure out how your past skills might translate into the world of coding or tech in a different role. I am open for also one-on-one. So I have the group coaching. I find that after doing this for a while that the group coaching is a little bit more engaging, and the one-on-ones after 6 months of focusing on coding, you forget who I am anyway, or that we even had a conversation. So we're going to skip that and just do the group coaching. But if you do have a specific topic, want to go over something on your resume, have a question about your past skills or whatever, anything that you want to talk about, feel free to reach out to me on Slack. And also used to have like a link to do all this to sign up, but then that always had to get moved around. Just message me on Slack if you would like to have a one-on-one and we'll figure out when the best time to get together is. There are assignments coming for career coaching. They're not in Canvas yet, but they will be. And when you see those, they will have due dates on them, but those are suggestions. So if you have the capacity to work on those assignments, feel free. But if you don't, just ignore them. We'll turn them in like a regular assignment if you do get a chance. So it's like resume draft. I'll look at your draft, give you feedback, and then there's resume final. And that was more towards the end. But that is really just if you want to work ahead and you want to do this as you go, fine. But if you don't, we're going to meet in person, or we'll vote to see if we meet in person or virtually by the time we get to the last week of class. And my vote is for in person, but we'll do what you guys all feel more comfortable with. And then we will go through all of it in a boot camp style 1 week of career coaching. So that's most of the things. So the next group sessions are going to be this Friday at 5 and Saturday at 11. So those are just once a month. You can come to as many or as few as you like. So you could come to both Friday and Saturday if you really wanted to, or you could just come to one, and you can come and go for as little or long as you like. Also, I'm not going to be offended if you stay for a couple of minutes, say hi, ask your question, and pop out. So I'm just holding the space. If no one shows in about 15 minutes, I'm going to just close. So I will open the class. If nobody comes, it's Friday night, you're all either working on coding or you're going out or you're doing whatever, taking a break. That's fine too. But I will be there holding the space for anybody who wants to pop in and has a question or wants to work on one of the assignments. We can also just work together. There is the career coaching channel in Slack. Make sure that you're in it, and that if you don't see it, that maybe you haven't been added. So make sure that you're there and you're getting those messages. There will also be like weekly things going on in there with reminders and just motivation and resources and things. When Canvas gets uploaded, there will be resources in there too. It'll have links to podcasts and blogs, where to find jobs, job boards, all kinds of resources for careers in there as well. If you see something that's not in there that you'd like added, let me know. We'll get it added. And I think that is all the things I wanted to touch on. If anyone has any questions related to any of this, I'm happy to answer them before I take off.
What were those hours on Friday?
Friday is 5 to 6.
Okay, thank you.
My Zoom link, so it's not the classroom one. So thanks for bringing that up. The in Slack, there is the link to my Zoom associated with those times. So you might want to pin that post that I put up, and I will repost it on Friday too into the career career coaching channel so that you have access to it, but it's my Zoom that you'll go into, because if we try the instructor one and they're using it, it's a problem. So I just use mine, so it's no crossover issues. Thank you. Great question. Anybody else?
I also just added that to Canvas as well. So right underneath the Zoom classroom link, there will be a link for the career coaching.
Thank you.
I have a question. So what if you already have like a resume set up? Do you want us to like work on a whole blank one or add on to it for this?
Thank you. I see that at least one other person had the same question. That's kind of up to you. We can take a look at what you have and see what we want to keep from it, or you can just start from scratch. So people have done both. Some people have started with a totally new one, and others have taken what they already had and kind of built on it. But either way, you can feel free, if you wanted to share it with me in Slack or something and say, take a look, give me your feedback, whatever, I'm happy to do that too.
All right, thank you.
Then
And I
you
know
beat me to it.
Go ahead, Wanya.
Oh no, I was just saying like he beat me to it.
Yeah, and I have some people are terrified of making a resume. I didn't know that was a thing till I started working in here. So if that is you too, we can also just let me know and we'll work through it.
Tiffany, I saw your note in the chat. It looks like you are in the channel already. So if you're in Slack, over on the left-hand side under channels, it should say CIC Career Coach. Do you see that?
No, only in student one and the bad channel, also in a successful channel.
How about now?
Now I can see it. Thank
There
you.
we go. We had a previous Tiffany in the class, so I think that's why you didn't get added. So you should be in there and all set now.
I don't see I don't see it under my Slack either.
Fixed.
There it is. Thank you.
No problem.
Everyone else sees it?
Oh, I don't either. Safi.
Gotcha.
Me
Thank
as well.
Who said that?
Zakeem here.
Thank you. All right, should be set now.
Now-
This is
Excuse me, I was a bit late. I want to know what was taking place Friday exactly.
That is the group career coaching. So it's basically just an open space for you to come and you ask questions or work on the career coaching assignments, which have yet to be posted to Canvas. So they're optional. So we'll be meeting Friday at 5 or Saturday at 11, either one, or you can come to both, whichever. And then we'll just be talking through career stuff.
Okay, thank you.
I also mentioned that if nobody shows within like 15 minutes, I'm just gonna close it out.
Okay.
So I got a question. So what's exactly is like a career coach? Like is it like somebody that could like help us like get a job like easily, or like how does that?
Yeah, the career coach is here basically to help you navigate anything and all things related to your career. So any of those technical things like writing the resume, cover letter, how to have a conversation, how to interview. If you got an interview somehow during the cohort or during the cohort, then I could help you before that interview, like practice things. Max can do all this stuff with you as well, but he can't do everything every time. So I'm here to help with the career coaching stuff. So it's basically for all of that. And then, like I said, anything else related to it, like nerves, imposter syndrome, there's a lot of other things, toxicity and trauma from past work events. I've talked to everybody about everything. So, if you're like, I want to look into getting into back-end development things, we can sit down and see what's available, what your skills are, what kind of, how to look for those jobs, pretty much anything related to it.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely take advantage of Laura's open office hours, both not only for working on the assignments, which will appear in Canvas shortly, but also thinking through like, hey, I don't want to get to the end of this and finish my education and then be like, well, the whole reason I'm doing this is to get a job, right? So you want to be taking advantage of Laura throughout the program. Whether you pop into office hours and have some questions about where you've struggled in the past, whether that's an interview or a resume or finding jobs, or whether it's just to listen in, right? Sometimes the best part of office hours is hearing other people's questions and you go, I didn't realize I had that question, but now I do and want to hear the answer to it. So I don't believe attendance is tracked in those, so
I can't.
they are completely optional, but highly encourage you to attend them and kind of think as you go. We've had a lot of students give us feedback of like, well, I'm still learning how to code, so I can't be applying for jobs yet because I can't do those jobs until I finish the program. And that's okay. But you want to kind of counterbalance that with, but there is a lot of stuff you need to learn to build a career outside of just the technical knowledge. And that's where Laura comes in to help. So if you can make those office hours, I highly recommend that you do, and just start thinking about once the assignments are posted, you may have some questions that start popping up. And like Laura said, those due dates are only suggestions, right? So just like all of our assignments, there's no penalty for turning things in late. They just need to be done by career week, right? Which is week 23 of the program. And even though that feels like a long way to go, as you're working on those assignments, as you're reading them, questions may pop up. And that's where you want to take advantage of Laura throughout the program instead of trying to cram it all in at the end.
Right, good points. And I do track attendance, but not in the like pass fail kind of a way. But it does help us gauge, people who participate along the way. They tend to be the ones to get the jobs faster. And keeping track of who's active in this space of careers and code helps us to see, who's getting placed and who's not. So
absolutely.
But if there are no other questions, I will wish you all the happiest of your first night of coding. All right, I look forward to seeing some of you Friday, Saturday.
Thanks for joining us, Laura.
Bye.
All right. So we are going to kick off class the way we always kick off class, with stand up. Before we do, though, I wanted to give you guys a little, we call this in the industry either a retrospective, or if you are into the darker arts, a post-mortem, right? And so I know that on Thursday we had our mentor session. That is the first time we have had a mentor networking event, right? So keep in mind that this is the first time that we've tried this mentorship program. And I know it was a little rocky. I know that it kind of got off to a slow start and then it kind of picked up a little bit. And we've got a lot of feedback both from students and from mentors. So I really appreciate all of that feedback. We will be implementing some of that in the next couple days before we pair you up with mentors. One thing that we heard back was that you would have appreciated some kind of bio, both for the mentors to know a little bit about your background, and then also for you guys to know a background on the mentors and where they're at. And so that's something that we'll be assigning as a homework assignment both to you guys and the mentors. We actually already have a similar homework assignment that we wait a couple weeks and then we post a blog post of meet the students for this cohort. So we're working on combining those kind of homework assignments so that they can be used not only for our blog post, but also for meeting all of the mentors. So we are working on implementing some of that feedback before we pair you up with mentors. But that is feedback that has definitely been heard loud and clear, and not only will be implemented not only on the future cohorts, but also for your cohort coming in the next couple weeks. So that is coming down the pipeline. Thank you all for bearing with us. Hopefully you met some mentors. Hopefully you had you got something out of the networking event, and at the very least, we will work on a very proprietary formula for pairing you up with mentors in the next week or two. So that's coming down the pipeline. With all of that said, let's start with our stand-up. What did we learn last week? How are we feeling about where we're at?
Definitely feel like it's not overwhelming, just a lot to prepare for, especially when thinking about designing websites when we use Figma, and also coming into terms of like working with other members that have different ideals on certain projects or certain aspects of a project.
Absolutely. And that's kind of a very interesting thing about our industry is I would say the majority of time you'll be working in a team at a company, right? Working with other developers, using project management tools like Trello to figure out how to collaborate. But it's often possible to do freelance work, right? Where you are your own boss and you are working with a client directly and you don't have a team kind of behind you supporting you. So you have to become a jack of all trades or start finding other contractors that you can kind of work with and build some kind of a team there. So that is definitely something that we try to give you the tools early on and then say, hey, if this is something that's interesting you, right? If UI design is something that you want to dive into, head to those daily outlines because those daily outlines have additional resources where you can kind of dive in and learn more there. What else from last week? What stuck out? How are we feeling?
Uh, to add on to it, from last week is the mentors, like talking, like communicating with people. I know a lot of people weren't sure of what exactly they're looking for in like having a mentor. I'll say, for example, like if you are more of a like having someone guide you, like having the absolute A to Z plan of guidance, then you're gonna have to spend time finding that type of person. But if you're more of someone that drops you little crumbs, then that's a different type of individual. Someone that gives you the crumbs of dancing around what you're trying to find and discover, but also they believe in like you can discover it yourself rather than having someone handhold you throughout the whole progress.
Absolutely. There's the saying you don't know what you don't know, right? And so it's kind of tough because you want to be paired up with a mentor that you really like and that you can see that you'll be using throughout the cohort. But at the same time, there's an entire curriculum where you're like, well, I don't know where I'm going to struggle, or I have to kind of find out what's going to help me the best, right? And so the mentors aren't there necessarily to tutor you, right? And that's something that when you think of a mentor, you could think of a mentor as someone who's going to help you academically, but then you can also think of a mentor as someone who has already gone through the program and knows kind of where they struggled and how they got through those tough points. And so that's the goal of the mentorship program is for it to be less necessarily tutoring, less kind of hey, where are you struggling on your code? And more of how are you doing overall in the program? Here are some resources that I found helpful. It's meant to be more of a advice situation than necessarily a tutoring situation. So we're gonna definitely work our hardest to make sure that you get paired up with the right people there. And as things go, a month into it, a couple meetings after meeting with your mentor, you may go, hey, there's not really a spark here. And that's okay too. We can start shifting you around to other mentors. But the goal is to have you have one mentor throughout the whole program that you can build a rapport with, right? It's just like when you go to mental health counseling, it's very different when you have the same counselor every single session and they can kind of track your progress as you go. Same for a doctor, same for anything, right? And so that's what we're trying to aim for with that mentor program. I know the networking event may have gotten off to a bumpy start, but we will work on improving that and making sure that you get matched up with a mentor you really like. Anything else from last week that stood out?
Yeah, I also wanted to add that a lot of the mentors that I met with stressed the importance of networking. They said most of the positions they held came from networking, like whether that is open hack or staying in touch with any of the coaches or TAs throughout the program really helped them further their career in coding. So I made a dedication, hopefully, to attend every open hack that we have, because I feel like it's really important having that relationship and starting off very early, and learning and getting to know as much people as you can.
Absolutely. You know, I got a new pair of shoes and someone said to me, "Were you going to break them in?" And I'm like, well, there's only one way to break in shoes. It's to wear them, right? So the same goes for networking, is you may feel intimidated by networking. You may feel that networking is no big deal. But the best way to get better at networking is to network, right? And so we will take off. Open hack, the dates kind of shift from month to month. They're normally the second Tuesday or Thursday of the month, but they're always during class time. And so we will be taking off of class, and they will be in person only. So if you can't make it due to a work schedule or whatever, it's not a big deal. We don't take attendance at Open Hack, but we highly, highly encourage you to attend that, because not only is it a great opportunity to network, but as you attend the 5 throughout the program, you'll start making connections. You'll start talking to people. You'll be able to talk to the same people again, and they can see your progress. And oftentimes, you know, the people who attend are people who attend every month. So Open Hack is a really great networking opportunity that we will be diving into in about 2 or 3 weeks. Anything else from last week that stood out?
Oh, also, I guess the importance of being organized or working as like a schedule on a calendar, because what really stood out to me when we was learning about what's it called, Trello, is that what it's
Yep,
called?
Trello.
Yeah, that's I didn't know it was that important to be like, being like organized when it comes to some things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and tonight will be the first night that we start diving into code and making files and the importance of organization there. We'll be, I'll be sharing my screen, and pretty much every class from here on out, 90% of it will be me sharing my screen, and we'll have breaks in between that allow you to catch up and play around with things. So the class format definitely shifts from this point forward to be very code heavy, as you would expect. But organization is something where if you feel like you're struggling with organization of digital files, of organizing your time, or of keeping track of tasks, that's definitely something that's great to either reach out to Jason or to me, or once you're paired with your mentor, them, and say, hey, I'm looking for some tips and tricks here, right? And you may find that a system that works for me doesn't work for you, but a system that works for Jason may work for you as well, right? So keep in mind that you're going to get a lot of different advice from a lot of different people here. But the biggest and most important thing is to reach out when you feel yourself struggling. Don't wait until it feels overwhelming, right? Because as soon as it feels overwhelming, the anxiety creeps in, and then we get an anxiety snowball of like, oh my God, I'm never going to catch up, right? So as you feel like your head starting to slip below the water, as soon as you start feeling a little bit stressed, lean into systems that have worked in the past for you. And if you find that those aren't working, definitely reach out for help. All right, last call for anything for stand up. Okay, so what are we doing today? Today, we are going to do a quick review of the car project designs. So we'll go team by team, have you guys kind of present, keep your presentations to like a minute or two. But what we're going to have you kind of present here is, what did you learn as you were going through it, right? This isn't necessarily all about the finished product. This is more about, hey, what popped up? What was harder than we thought? Where did you guys invest more time? But a really quick presentation. I will be the one sharing the screen so that you guys don't have to share your screen, but whoever wants to chime in, whether it's one team member or a couple team members, that's totally fine. This will be kind of organic. But we're going to do a quick review of those designs so that the rest of the class can kind of see how we think about UI a little differently and how it all builds together. The other thing I want to preface here is everyone is learns at a different pace and has a different level of experience with not only coding but also using the Mac for the first time. So the first week of class is always a little rough. In the 30-second feedback forms, I almost always get submissions that are an equal number of 2 slows and 2 fasts, and that is okay. That is just natural. That has happened every single cohort we have run this program. So bear with us in the first week or two of doing things technically. I think that you guys may be the most technically competent class we have ever had, which is awesome. I'm hoping that that will speed up the first 2 weeks of class, at least on the technical side. But just wanted to preface that of some of you are going to be sitting there and going, oh my God, how do they not know how to create a new folder? And other people are going to go, I've never made a new folder on the Mac. I don't understand how to do this. That's okay. I promise you it all does equal out. Once we finish the car project design, we will go into getting our code folder set up. We will be opening and installing VS Code for the first time, and we're going to get everyone set up with live share. After we do that, we are going to have our first day with Intro to HTML. So hopefully a lot of these things are going to just be a review for you from Code Academy, but we like to start at the beginning and work our way up to that. The most important thing I can say as someone learning software engineering, look for patterns because the computer runs all of our code off patterns. So as you're looking for things, start to go, oh, I understand how this is similar to this. So pattern recognition is something that when that clicks, that tends to be when you start going, hey, that's when I start understanding this. That's when I start understanding why the computer is running the code, or more importantly, not running the code. So we're going to dive into all of these elements. We're going to give you some time to play around with that. We will show you the live server in VS Code, and before you know it, we will be out of here. There are some resources down here if you are a visual learner, or if you are someone who is particularly vocab driven. These are some helpful things for you to dive into. Any questions about where we're headed before I pull up Figma? Okay, let me head over to Figma, and we are going to start with the always on team. So if you guys want to talk amongst yourselves or decide who is going to talk to show us what's going on. All right. So this is what the always on team came up with. So talk us through anyone on that team. How'd you come up with this? What was easy? What was hard? What was unexpected? How are you feeling about this? Well, don't all go at once.
Sorry, I'm getting my notes out.
We started with basically like when we get in our own cars, what's the first thing that we see? So like the time, the weather, yeah.
And then we kind of like tried to figure out a way of like prioritizing what needs to be like more visible, like your speed, what gear you're currently in, stuff like that. So I made this abomination. I'll take the heat for it. The car specifically. So the carrots on either side are sort of like the blind side or
Blind
I'm
spot
not,
monitoring.
yes. When you have your lane keeping, the sort of lane underneath kind of pops up. Try to think. We did make a, we did make a small change to the bottom panel. For driver and passenger side controls.
For the
go ahead.
profiles and the charging, we put on the upper right, or like everything that like you would want to see, but it's just like gonna be a little icons like the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, the charging, whatever, battery life, whatever.
So awesome job here. We can look at this and really start to realize, all right, I can envision this, right? If I were now a software engineer who had to go build this, I can start breaking this down into tasks. And that's one of the most important things that you can get from a mockup, right? Not only the general feeling of, oh, if I were a user, I would understand everything on the screen here, but also from an engineering standpoint, well, how do we go about implementing this, right? Because we have to break things down into tasks, just like we broke down the requirements and just like we broke down different technical stacks. Engineering, at the end of the day, is just breaking things down into small enough pieces that we can build them, right? And that's engineering pretty much in any sense, not just software. So what I really like about this is you've prioritized kind of the most important information up at the top, right? And then you've also started to think through little intricacies of, well, the left passenger and the right passenger probably have different, or the driver and the passenger have different climate zones, right? So we can start to see that information come out, and also little pieces of functionality like, hey, I may want to be able to change the seat heater or change the temperature without needing an entirely separate menu to go in and trigger that. So really like that you've kept the icons down at the bottom because that was what was agreed upon, but also how we can start seeing the kind of the report out of any warning icons, and everything is really well prioritized with the ability of getting into additional functionality, right? So if you had more time, you could start getting into, hey, how do we, what happens when I click on this passenger icon? Is that a drop down? Is that another screen? We start making additional frames for that, and we may even get into the prototype, right? So that I can actually hit the play button up here at the top, and actually be able to click on that profile icon and see what drops down. But this is perfect of where we want to be because we understand the functionality, and we can say as engineers, we can dive into that and see how all of that works. So really awesome job here. With all of that said, next up we have the climate team. So I'm going to switch over to climate. I'm just going alphabetically. All right, so we've got two different screens here. Who would like to talk us through this?
I apologize about the second one. That's just something I was doing when I got home.
Okay, so I'll zoom into the first one.
Yeah.
So what did we come up with? Where are we at? What challenges did we run into?
So the first one on the always on display is the car seat. With the car seat, we have like the driver's passenger side. It shows you like the like whether or not which spaces you're going to be controlling, whether or not you're controlling the front end of the car or the back end. So we have temperature control where you could change the temperature. Right there are the heated seats, I believe that was. And then then we move on to that icon, that was pretty good. You see it in your car all the time, kind of. You know,
Yeah, that was like the defrost setting right there.
yeah.
So I think that this is a good example of when we get into climate, how many different things we need to control in climate, right? Because we think about climate in our car of being just temperature, right? And then we get into, well, where's the air coming from? Then we get into, well, you have to be able to adjust the vents from the touch screen. Then you get into, well, what about defrost, right? Is that something that is easily accessible? You get into all kinds of controls in climate that sometimes we want to think about, all right, we have a list of requirements and we've got this visual design we've got to accomplish, but the things that need to be in the design sometimes get nestled into the requirements. And so sometimes it makes sense to do a planning step, right? And say, all right, what are the different sections of our screen that we need? Airflow is one of them. Temperature is another. Defrost is a fourth. Seat controls, heated seats would be a fourth, right? Is there a heated steering wheel? That may be a fifth thing, right? So once we break them down and say, all right, instead of thinking about these as sentences, we're going to think about these as areas of the screen that we need to build out. Sometimes that can make it a little bit easier to think through how are we going to divide up the screen? What are we going to put where? And that can allow us to accomplish a little bit more on this. So I think that this is a really good start. But I think we're missing some requirements here, right? Where if I handed this off to the engineering team, I wouldn't feel that I could really control the climate in my car with just this alone. So granted, you guys only had a couple minutes to work on this, and that, Figma is a new application. So it's not like I'm taking off points or anything, but something to think about, right? All right, now that we kind of know how to use this tool, what did we miss here? And that may have been kind of a sub-planning step along the way of, did we make sure that we got all of the requirements into the design so that we are able to implement on it? So really good starting point for this. And you got, the most important functions in there of controlling the temperature and basic defrost. But from a visual design perspective, something like over here, we said, hey, this is going to be only for the always on team, right? So we can't open the climate and have the speedometer disappear, which is kind of what you're implying here, right? Of the seat and the defrost would take over that always on section. So make sure that you're understanding requirements or asking questions as you design, because something like this, we would go, well, you don't have access to putting anything there. The speedometer needs to go there, that kind of thing. So good starting point. Okay, let's move on to controls and settings. So who would like to talk us through what you have here?
That's pretty nice.
Yeah, you hear me?
Yep.
Alrighty. Ignore the ombre color effect on software updates. We were just messing around with some of the colors. Don't want to make it a nightmare for people who are colorblind. So yeah, we're just doing probably a menu system that almost everybody's familiar with at this point. I think one of the only things that we don't have is some kind of like arrow to indicate that you can click on it, that it opens up into a larger menu system. The intention was to click on one of these settings and have it open an entire new page instead of having it kind of slide so they're sandwiched to try and take as much of the screen real estate as possible. So for instance, under like drive settings, you could click into that and that would show, your model of the car with all the settings that you need for there. There's not a whole lot else. We tried to include some symbols to help people get a quick glance at things. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a really good thinking through of the requirements, right? This is, you guys had, I think 10 rows on that spreadsheet, and it really shows that you captured the categories of them, right? Would love to see kind of one more additional screen here, which would have been, hey, all of these are good for diving into kind of the functionality of the car. but I would have loved to have seen like the quick controls, right? Of what are the most important things, like wiper speed or headlights, that I would have like a one-click thing where all of the important stuff would be here, and then the menu would also show to allow me to get into some of the more advanced features. So would love to have seen kind of that, but that gets into a prioritization thing, right? Of do we want to get the menu done, which is the most important for navigation, or do we want to get kind of the first screen done, which is going to be most important for functionality? So that will be something that you guys will have to think about in your capstone, because oftentimes you feel like the beginning of the project, you're not making any progress because you're doing so much setup, so much navigation, so much footers and the initial homepage and all of that stuff, that once you get it done, you're really able to run quickly on the rest of the screens because you've thought through your navigation so much. So that's a very common thing that happens in projects. And we can start to see where this would form, right? Like you said, we see menus all of the time, but that would kind of be the next thing that I would prioritize is, all right, we know we got to build out all of these menus, but before we even get to this menu screen or alongside this menu screen, what are the most important controls? Because I think that that's what's missing in this. But love seeing you guys think through, out of all of these requirements, what do they boil down to? What menu do we need for all of that? So good work there.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
when we're doing these things, shall we say, in a more live fire scenario,
Yeah.
is there going to be things like a style, like within a company, there's going to be probably a style guide or something like that that we have to sort of match so that we can do things like, hey, we know we should have it looking like this, and this is the way it should be coming out, and this is how we want to present things. That might actually help guide us a little bit.
Absolutely. And so most of the time when you're coming into a company, you're not going to be creating something from scratch, right? You're going to be creating something like a new page or a new section of the app that already has a style done. And then it also depends on what size company you're in, right? So if you're doing this solo, you may have a client come to you that goes, I don't know what I want my website to look like. I'm creating it from scratch. You figure that out. Or you may have someone come to you and go, hey, I just need a new page added to my website. Everything on it is fine. Just make this new page look like the other page. And so this is where you get into, well, if you're doing it solo, are you going to do the UI design yourself, or are you going to hire a designer who will do all of the design work and then hand it off to you and say, hey, now go code this out? So we certainly don't expect you to be UI experts in design, right? It would be very insulting to say, oh, you can learn UI design in a 3-hour class or even less, right? UI design is something that it is an entire job title on its own. But we show you these tools to kind of get you thinking about planning out your UI, even if it's not going to be super gorgeous, before you dive into, well, I got to go code this out. So this is more of a wireframing exercise than a design exercise for sure. The other thing is we will be using a framework called Bootstrap. And Bootstrap has all of those, has a bunch of components already defined for you. So when you make a button, you don't have to draw a rectangle in Figma and make it a rounded corner and select the color of the button. Bootstrap's going to have a button for you that looks kind of off the shelf, but also looks a lot better than a button that you would go and create yourself. That goes for tables, that goes for header components, that goes for nav bars, right? Bootstrap has a whole list of those components, and we can actually import them into Figma so that we can use pre-made components instead of having to draw rectangles and use emoji. And so that's also something that makes life a little bit easier. But yeah, it all depends on, are you working with a designer on your team? Are you trying to accomplish a full mock-up? Are you only trying to do a wireframe for identifying functionality? We can kind of blur those lines in Figma a little bit. But really good question. And yes, oftentimes, if you are expected to do design work, you will be given a standard by the company of, here are the colors to use, here's what a button looks like, all of that kind of stuff.
I got one thing really quick.
Yeah.
That I just wanted to add for when we were doing this exercise. I think one of the biggest problems that at least I was running into was how to communicate how I was seeing something in my head to the rest of the group to get everybody on the same page, like quickly spending a whole lot of time designing. It's more of trying to get people to see what I'm seeing.
Absolutely. And that's something that happens all the time, right? And so oftentimes the best solution, just like I say, don't start at code, start at planning, is to pull out a piece of paper or go over to a whiteboard, right? And be like, look, I can't get the words out enough to articulate what I'm trying to communicate here, but I can draw it really quickly. Because oftentimes we can get on the same page visually before we can by just talking through it, right? And so sometimes the right answer isn't Figma. Sometimes the right answer is pull out your notebook, right? My background is blurring it, and actually draw things through, right? And that I actually prefer to wireframe on paper or on a whiteboard instead of Figma. Figma, I think, is a great mock-up tool, but it can be a little slow to implement your ideas. And so starting with a true wireframe on paper can make it a little bit easier to get the team on the same page and also to get to implementing that in Figma. So really, really good point there. Any other feedback? Mo through in the chat, Procreate and AutoSketch are two applications you can use. Really, you can even use the Notes app like on an iPad with an Apple Pencil if you're a stylus person, but you don't even have to get as fancy as that. You know, paper and pencil is also totally fine. So it's finding whatever tool works for you is really, really important. And we do have an assignment coming up for create your wireframes. And the wireframes for your capstone, once we get to that, we're still a couple weeks away. You can do that anywhere, right? You can do that on a whiteboard and take a picture and send it that way. You can do it on paper and scan it in. We just want to see that you've started to think through wireframing before you dive into your code, but that's coming down the road. Okay. Let's move on to the nav team. So couple screens that we have here. Talk us through how you got to this.
All right, so how we got to this was so first like we kind of like look at like Google Maps a bit, but we didn't want to like take all that stuff. We wanted to like switch it up a bit. So what we did was we well, first we put the compass like over here, so we know like where like north, south, east, west is, because that's kind of important to have right in the map. And then we put the what is it, the location, like your exact the pinpoint your exact location, so you know where you at. And then we put these bottom ones over here, like home, work,
They're like little in-app shortcuts.
yeah. Yeah, and so so like you could just say like, oh yeah, I want to go home, so you can just tap on home, put the address of your home, and it'll just do it for you, like just auto do everything.
And this is the second page of what we want to populate after we click the home button. So like, or not after you click the home button, or after you search something in the address bar. And then this little contact menu that pop up is like what you recently searched, and also like some predicted text based on like what you typed in. So if I type in like restaurants, a few restaurants could pop in or whatever. I mean, or I can also press the button, the shortcut button, which I thought was cool. And
Awesome.
Then and then this one, well, I mean,
oh, sorry.
you gotta get to like certain like directions, right? You gotta like, oh, I want to go from point A to point B. So, you know, we had to like make it where you have to go, oh yeah, I'm at home, but I want to go to like the Burger King and whatnot. So we have to have like the GPS like kind of like track your location and see like, oh well, we turn right, turn left, and stuff like that.
Yeah, those by turn directions. And we have like up here is like the information about your current trip, where you going, your ETA, because I like that. I'm able to see that on Google Maps. And then this is like your immediate direction. So like let's say you're driving on 2nd Street, And then over here, I have like the directions that's gonna come next. I like to see that when I'm driving. That's what I was thinking about when I was making this app. Like, what do I want? Like when I in the navigation system. So, and I also put it over here because that's near the passenger side. And I think that if you have a passenger that's helping you navigate, they can tell you like, oh, what's coming up next if you're like keeping your eyes on the road. And we were talking about adding a stop in our large group discussion, and I was like, gotta put that on there. So I have a little button about adding a stop. And I also got this sound symbol because sometimes I want to turn Siri off. So I also has that. I have that as like a ready object. Oh, and the speed limit too.
So love that you're drawing on previous experience, right? Because GPS is one of those things that we've all used and we all know how Google does it, how Apple does it, how our car does it. And so leaning on that, you guys, I think, had the fewest number of rows. I think you only had 2 rows in the spreadsheet. But even with only those 2 tiny bits of information, you were able to create this mock-up that has all of the functionality in it that we've come to know and love, even down to the speed limit, right? Where it's like, oh, when Google added that a couple years ago as drivers, we were all like, oh, that's great. How many times have I been on this road and not known what the speed limit is, right? So love seeing you guys think through this and the multiple screens. And then, you can get down into the nitty gritty of like, okay, well, when I go in the address bar, what's the keyboard supposed to look like? We may be the team that is the first one to implement a keyboard. So how does that show up on the screen, right? So little details like that, obviously we can always expand on it. Wouldn't expect you to do that in the short time period that you had. But we start seeing, because you've got these icons anchored, it makes it very clear that they should be on every screen and that they are shortcuts, and that we can start to visualize kind of, all right, what is all the information when a route is active compared to when a route is not active. And so really, really awesome job kind of thinking through this, drawing on previous experience, and getting to a nav system that you're like, yeah, I could see myself using this in the car. So awesome job on the nav team.
Thanks. This was really fun. It
Yeah,
really
it was.
made me like feel excited about doing stuff like this in the workplace. I was like, ooh, I like this. That was nice.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to go to the music team, and then we will finish up with phone. So the music team, kind of talk me through how you got to this.
Awesome. So Asma and I worked on this. We got a lot of our inspiration off of our own various music streaming apps. I specifically looked at or referenced music, Apple Music. And so this is kind of split. There's a second page to the right that I'm not sure if you could. Yeah, so especially when looking at this, the 3 icons that you see on the top right are quite honestly in the exact order that you'd find it in Apple Music, but but it was just easier to have a baseline off of that. What you don't see in Apple Music that you'll see here is that, for example, the play button, once click, will turn to the pause button, but we found that it would be much easier or simpler in navigation terms if they were separate buttons, just for the driver's sake. What else? We also liked having the image there, so we put a placeholder box for various images or pictures of albums that would display as one drives. And then if you were to go back to the left once more, thank you. And so when coming up with, I feel like the hardest part was choosing the icons. I know that it wasn't necessarily like the main focus, but it was important to us to choose icons that were reflective of what they were named. And so we have a play button for the playing and a radio and other respective ones. So it was very interesting. We did have a smaller group, but it was just nice, even though that the group was smaller, to be able to collaborate with somebody else and kind of find a commonalities in what we wanted and what we envisioned the app to, or the screen to look like. So.
Absolutely. So great starting point on this, right? Because what's the most important thing, or where do you start with your music? All right, well, what's my source for that? And then, okay, now that I select it, what's the most important thing to control, right? So even though you didn't necessarily get into like, oh, I need to be able to search for a song and select it, you started with what are the most important things here, what source am I on, and how do I control the music? And so you've always got that kind of divide and conquer approach, right? Of, do we want to do kind of the one very advanced feature, or do we want to prioritize and get the most important features done? So I really admire that you guys prioritized that, and I think that functionality wise, we can very quickly see how this would work, and also drawing on experience of, well, what does this look like not only on my phone, but how does my music control work in the car right now? So I think that you guys did a really good job of hitting requirements here. And of course, if you had more time, you'd be able to get into the music selection and all of that kind of stuff. So excellent, excellent job on this. Whenever we see a mock-up where we're like, I can figure out how to use that without any instruction, that's always a good standard to shoot for. So awesome job on that. All right, let's finish it up with the phone team.
I'll speak. First of all, sorry about the double image at the bottom. We were pretty much brainstorming with the limited amount of time. So for the first image on the top left, immediately I was thinking of when you answer the phone. Granted, it shouldn't be that small. We wanted to expand it, take up the whole screen, because you know how when you answer on your cell phone, it switches to the whole entire app, and you want to be able to click on the red box, which is just hang up the phone, or the green box to answer the phone, and then in the middle is the mute icon, if you wanted to mute yourself. And on the top box is usually when you answer a phone, you see the number. That's a different thing. But the one on the left is so when you answer your phone call, you see the person that calls you and or the number that called you. And at the bottom is the minutes going by when you're on the call. So that's the first part. Then the other part on the right is we wanted to like expand the screen. So up there is like the number being punched in, with the black box and the white boxes being the keys for the user. So if they wanted to call that number, they wanted to exactly enter a phone number, they can be able to enter in the phone number they want to call. And at the bottom left, again, the right is not important because it's a duplicate, but this is the feature when you are able to text on the dashboard. So not text while driving. We thought about more like if you were stationary, like if your phone was dead and like if you wanted to text on the keyboard of the car instead of your phone, like your phone is charging, you were able to type in on that dash. Or vice versa, where your phone is dead, you're still able to use the dash because you put in all the transfer into contacts and information into the dash. And that's about it. Again,
So
deeply apologize.
we start to see kind of the key functionality here, right, of important things like call status. But we also get into learning how important design is, right? And so little things here like just putting in the number 123 and actually building out the keypad would give us more of a feeling in that wireframe of what's supposed to be there, right? So oftentimes we want to start to prioritize, right? And go, all right, do we want to get all of these screens done, or do we want to get one screen to the point where we would really feel like that functionality works, right? So even little things here, like even if you couldn't find an icon for the green and red buttons, you could put a word in there, right? Call and end, or something like that. So I think that this is a good starting point. We covered a wide area of functionality, but it's also at the point where I'm like, I'd want to see a little bit more, right? I want to see, I don't kind of understand that this is a call in progress screen because we're missing some icons, or I don't really understand that this is the dial screen because we're missing a keypad with numbers. So good job with the time that you had there. And we see you thinking through different features, but also not quite at that point where we feel like we could go and necessarily implement it. So with all of that said, do we feel that this is a worthwhile exercise? Did we see kind of how we got to design, how we work through requirements, to wireframing, to Figma and the software tool? How are we feeling about this in general?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I like
Yeah,
the
I like it.
exercise. Definitely
Yeah,
brings a
yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, I like it too.
Definitely is a challenge to learn how to use everything. I like that. I think like a couple days later, I watched that the video that you sent that with the guy. I think his name was like, can't remember the guy's name. But the Figma video.
Yep.
How to do the breakdowns and everything, how to use every component of it. I liked that a lot. So I was able to learn how to use it pretty well.
Yeah, so that video, there are two different ones. One is the Intro to Figma course. That's like a 24-minute thing. And then there's like a 2-hour one here. These are in the C6 daily outlines that are linked in modules over here. So Canvas modules and then C6 daily outlines right at the top. So if you are interested in learning Figma a little bit more, highly recommend both those videos. The 2-hour course is definitely a much deeper dive, but the world of design is something that, like I said, is its own job title, right? You can become an interface designer and all you do is use Figma for 8 hours a day. So design is something that we try to just give you a taste of without doing a complete deep dive on. Any other comments on Figma on this exercise?
One of the things with like Figma that I thought was kind of a little challenging is to when you at the left side when you have those little boxes and stuff, and sometimes we put an emote and you put another emote of the same emote, you don't know which goes with which box it is. That's like one of the things I was having trouble with. So I like try to like organize it, like putting like different names, or like let's say if the email was phone, I put phone E, and it has this like the same box with that emote. Then I put like phone E2 or something like that. So that was one of the challenges I had with like Figma.
Yes. And that's something that we run into. A lot of Photoshop artists will talk about how they do their layer management, how they get things in groups and make the groups and layers easier to manage that way. And so that's something that I think all of those tools tend to struggle with. But if you start with a paper wireframe, sometimes it can be easier to group those things and go, all right, this is my nav bar. That's going to be one thing and everything's going to be in that folder. And that can also make it easier for not only duplicating that across other frames, but also in terms of, hey, I want to turn this off and just focus on this one component and then be able to turn it back on as well. So layer management is definitely a skill if you're going to be spending a lot of time in Figma. Anything else from that exercise? Okie doke. So we are going to dive into code for the first time. We will take our break at 7 p.m. for 25 minutes. When you come back, I will actually show you what the actual Tesla interface is like, so you can compare it to kind of what you guys created compared to what actually exists in the wild. We will try and contain that to about 15 minutes. But I think that it's really cool to be able to compare what you guys thought through, all of that team communication that you had, thinking through requirements, and then comparing it to what actually exists in the wild. So one thing that I think is interesting every year that we do this, did anyone Google Tesla interface? So think
No.
about that. We drew on all of these experiences that we have with driving in cars, with like the music team, right? I think drawing on the inspiration of that app that you used. but don't underestimate your resources, right? As an engineer, you're going to be constantly reading documentation. There's nothing wrong with actually Googling how it's already done and drawing experience on that. So I always think that that's interesting that you guys all knew where we were trying to get to, but no one was like, huh, I wonder if I go on Google Images and type in Tesla navigation, what pops up and what we can draw on from there. So you guys did an awesome job on the assignment. Hopefully you got a taste of what it's like to work in a team. Like I said, the good news is almost the rest of the course, we have no other group projects, but that doesn't mean that we discourage you from working in groups. So use your back channel as we start learning to code, as the assignments start to pick up. Use that back channel to organize study groups, meet at common space, meet at a coffee shop, even jump in this Zoom room and kind of work together on that. We highly encourage you to work together on things. But at the same time, it isn't a requirement. So we like to give you a taste of it early on and then let you guys self-organize on those study sessions. As we get to the end of modules, I will poll you guys on office hours. And then I will also poll you on whether you want them in person or virtual. So that will be coming down the pipeline. With all of that said, let's finally dive into some code. Is there anyone who does not have VS Code installed yet? Okay. So I'm going to quickly go through those steps. So if you pop open a new tab and do a search for VS Code, you can go to the download link right from Google. Make sure it says Visual Studio Code. You don't want Visual Studio itself. You want VS Code or Visual Studio Code. Down here, you'll scroll down and you can either hit this download button here or the Apple Silicon button. Everyone should be on Apple Silicon at this point. If you do have an Intel chip, you probably know you have an Intel chip and you can download that one. So I will hit the Apple Silicon one. I'm going to go down to my downloads folder. I'm going to click on the zip file. That will automatically open it for me, and it will pop open my downloads folder. It is very tempting, and if you have VS Code in your downloads folder, please, for the love of God, listen up right now. You never want to run an application from a downloads folder or a disk image, a DMG. The Mac does really weird things. It doesn't have the right permissions. It's in a weird spot. So what you always want to do is if it is in the downloads folder or on your desktop or in a disk image, you want to grab that application and drag it over to your applications folder and drop it right in there. So you never, ever want to run any application from any place other than your applications folder. And if it's in your dock, hopefully the dock is going to the applications folder. Once we have it there, we're going to go to applications. We're going to scroll down to VS Code, and we are going to open VS Code for the first time. From there, we are going to, and this should be for everyone, we are going to go to File up at the top and Open Folder. VS Code will let you open files directly, but it works 10 times easier when we open a folder for VS Code to operate in. So I'm going to say Open Folder. That's going to pop me open here, and I'm going to go to my desktop over on the left. I'm going to go to New Folder, and I am going to call that C6 My Code. I'm going to hit enter on that. And then we will use a week and day structure for all of our file organization digitally. Why do we do that? Well, because most of the time our code will actually write over a couple days, right? Projects won't always span, won't always get done in one day. But we break that code up into separate day files so that you can track your progress in those files, right? So you can say, this is what I accomplished in the first day. Here's what I added to in the second day. Here's what we finished up in the third day. You won't do that for when you're working in the industry, right? You're not going to come in beginning of your workday and duplicate out all of the code that you worked on yesterday. That is not normal. But for the sake of organization, we put a code folder on our desktop. We always organize by week and then day. And then if we're working on multiple things in that day, we will also have a project level. So having that code organization right now, super, super important. So we're going to create, once we're in the My Code, we're going to create a new folder and we're going to call this week 2, W2, and avoid spaces in your file or folder names. It's not as important right now, but it will make life much harder for you as we get into the terminal. So if you really want to have a space, use a dash or an underscore instead. But for now, no spaces in folder names, no spaces in file names. Trust me, you will thank me as we get into the terminal a couple weeks from now. So in my week 2, I'm going to do yet another new folder, and I'm going to call it day 1. Now, you may notice that my file organization is in columns. That is way easier to me. If you go up to the top here, you can see that you probably have it as icons. If you are familiar with icons, if that makes sense to you, that's totally fine. I definitely prefer this columns view because it lets me see what folders I'm in and as I get nested down. So again, that's up here in the columns. Now that I'm finally in my day 1 folder, that is the folder I am going to open. So I'm going to pause there. Anyone need a repeat? Anyone not have D1 in their VS Code? We went to the desktop. We created a new folder called C6 My Code. We created a week 2 folder inside that folder. And then we created a day 1 folder inside of the week 2 folder that is inside the My Code folder. And that's what we opened up in VS Code. So if you have D1 up here in the top, we are good to go.
I do not. I have so it goes by C6, that's my code, and then with a slash W2 with a slash D1.
Okay, so I would go File, Open Folder again. Navigate down into your D1 folder, and then hit Open on that. And see if that gets you just to the D1 here.
Yeah, it worked.
Cool. Other questions?
So when creating a folder and opening the day 1 folder, I have a pop-up screen of, do you trust the authors of the files in this folder? And
go ahead and hit allow on that, or yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
And I really do not seem to be getting this.
Okay. Do you want to share your screen and we can walk through it?
I'll certainly try.
So the first time while you're getting that set up, when you share your screen, the Mac is very finicky about privacy. So this is a good step for everyone to do proactively, because at some point, all of you will be sharing your screen to kind of debug or help you get unstuck. So if you go to Apple up at the top and down to System Settings, in Search, you're going to do a search for privacy and security. Click on that privacy and security here, and then you're going to go down to System, Screen and System Audio Recording, I believe. Yeah, that's it. Once you get into Screen and System Audio Recording, Zoom is hopefully in this list. Go ahead and toggle that on. That is what will let you share your screen. So again, that was Apple System Settings. Up at the top, type in privacy in the search bar. Click on privacy and security. then go down to screen and system audio recording, and then toggle Zoom on.
Nothing is in that box.
Okay, if
Yeah,
Zoom
I got
is
nothing.
not listed here, go ahead and hit the little plus icon, and then it's going to ask for your Mac password. And then you can go to applications, scroll all the way down to the bottom, grab zoom.us, and hit open on that.
It says Zoom US may not be able to record the content of your screen until it is quitted.
Okay, that's fine. Just hit OK on that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat this process of putting Zoom on?
Yep. Apple system settings. Do a search up at the top for privacy. Click on the first privacy and security. Go to screen and system recording. Hit the plus icon in the first section, not this one down here, but this one. Go to applications and then scroll all the way down to Zoom and hit open on that. If you do not have Zoom in this list, you can download it from the App Store or from the Zoom website.
Okay, and then it asks later and or quit and reopen.
You can do later on that one. And then as long as it's toggled on, you should be all set and good to go.
All set and good to go.
Cool. All right. Michael, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will let you take over. Go ahead and hit open system settings, and then you can, I think, ignore that pop-up. Okay. All right, so let's go back to VS Code. You are muted, by the way, if you're talking to us.
All right, if you can't see, I assume you're not able to see my screen?
I was able to, and then it stopped. I
Okay.
thought it was your screen. I hope it was your screen. So head back to Zoom, green share screen button. There we go. Now we're back in. Okay. So go ahead and switch to VS Code from your dock in the bottom right.
Come on, you can do it. There we go. You're looking at the wrong screen, I assume?
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
This looks better? Okay.
Yep. So you got the folders created, which is good. We just opened the home folder instead of opening enough layers down, basically. So you're going to go back up to File and Open Folder. And then you're going to click on your user desktop. Oh, okay. So we're going to fix that because we don't want it. So I'm going to request remote control.
Okay.
And it's probably going to say, yeah, so go ahead and hit open system settings on that. I don't know. Will it let me? Darn it. Hit the back button up there. And this is a good step for everyone to do as well. Click on privacy and security in the top. Yep, that one. Go down to, I want to say accessibility. And then turn Zoom on.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
And you can either fingerprint or use your password.
Should be all done there.
And I now have remote control. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to delete this folder just so we don't end up with them in two places.
Yep.
And then I'm just going to nestle you down into day one. And when we hit open on that, now you only have your day one open and you're all caught up.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry, it's brand new to MacBooks. Sorry.
No, this is, like I said, everyone's going to be at a different speed and everyone's going to go, this class was so boring, it was too slow. And then the other half of the class is going to go, this is too fast, slow down, slow down. It all levels out after the second week, I promise. Anyone else need help?
I do.
Sure, share your screen.
How do I do that?
So green button down at the bottom. And then when you go to share your screen, it's always going to be better to share desktop 1 or desktop 2 as opposed to a specific window. Because oftentimes I'm going to be switching between windows and I need to see the whole desktop. So whenever you share your screen, much better to share all of desktop 1 or 2 as opposed to a specific window. Okay. So I'm going to request remote control. Okay, and go ahead and do open system settings, toggle zoom on there, and then fingerprint or use password. Okay, and now I can take control. So I am going to go up to File and Open Folder. I'm going to head to your desktop. And it doesn't look like we have anything created there. So I'm going to do, did you create the folders already?
No, not yet.
Okay. So I'm going to do that for you here. I'm going to call this C6 my code. I'm going to create a new folder in there called week 2. I'm going to create another new folder in there called day 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and pop that open and you are good to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else? Okay. So we've got Mo threw out a good tip. Some developers like coding with their monitors actually rotated up. So instead of it being horizontal in the vertical position. I'm personally not one of those developers. I kind of wish I had done that in the beginning. And you may need to have I don't think our monitor stands support it out of the box. So you may have to play around with that. But that is an option of having your one monitor vertical so that you can fit more lines of code on the screen. Like I said, I don't personally do it, but I do know a lot of developers who do have their screen vertical instead of horizontal, and you can do that in system settings. That is a good pro tip. Okay, let's write our very first HTML. And I know it shouldn't be your first HTML because you did this in Code Academy, but anyway, it's exciting because we're doing it all together for the first time. So I am going to create a new file. I can either go File, New File, or click on this New File link right here. And we are in this class, we're always going to pick text file built in. We never want to do Jupyter Notebook. That is for a different language. So we're going to pick a text file. And it's going to give us this thing in here. So what we are going to do is we are going to type in hello world. The problem is this file doesn't really exist yet, right? We just typed text in, but we didn't tell it where to save it. So we're going to hit Command S or File Save, and it's going to say, what do you want to save this as? Now, we don't want to save it as hello world. We're going to call it a special file name called index because the computer recognizes whatever we call index is going to be our home page. Just like the index is at the beginning of a book, an index is at the home page of our website. But we don't want to hit save on that because the computer does not know what language this is. So the Mac is much better about doing this. On Windows, it kind of can hide the extension sometimes, but the computer needs to know what kind of file is this. Is this a JavaScript file? Is this a CSS file? Is this a Word document? Is this an Excel file? The way we tell the computer that is with a file extension. So we are going to type in index.html as our file extension. Now we can go down to the bottom and hit the save button. And you will see we now have our index.html created here. So again, the steps: file, new file. We pick text file. We type hello world into the file. We go Command S or File Save. We save that as index.html. And then finally, we are able to go over to our desktop, pop open our C6 My Code folder, and open up week 2, open up day 1, double click on index.html, And in Safari or Chrome, we should see our first hello world. Lots of little steps there. Again, file, new file, text file, type in hello world, Command S to save. We call it index.html. Then we go to Finder or to our desktop. We open up our my code, our week 2, our day 1. We double click on our index.html, and we have our very first web page. If you were able to get that done, go on break, be back at 7:25. If you are not able to see your hello world, raise your hand or come off mute, and I will help you through the steps.
Real quick,
Yeah.
how do I get it so the settings for VS Code to auto update the what I'm viewing in as soon as I leave focus, I think.
We will get to that if not the last thing tonight, we'll start there tomorrow.
Okay.
Good question. Just an hour ahead of us covering that.
Additional like extensions for VS Code.
Yeah, so we'll go over extensions in 2 or 3 weeks. Right now, you definitely don't need any. But as we go, you'll see that like we'll set up live share, and we'll also set up the GitHub extension and code blocks and a couple other things. So as we go, we'll cover extensions, but we hold off as until we need them, basically. Great question, though.
Where am I gonna be opening up to find this file? Inside my computer browser? I mean,
Yeah, so you can either go to Finder to open it, or you can go to your desktop and just double click on the My Code folder that you just created,
I see.
and then just nestle your way down to that index.html file. And if you double click on it, it should pop it open in the browser.
I see. I have it here. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anyone else?
I'm also still waiting for my Doug Max.
You'll get them eventually. You gotta prove your worth to get a duck.
Mhm.
All right, go on break. If anyone needs help as they're going, just raise your hand in Zoom. And when we come back from break, I will help you out to catch up. But otherwise, go on break. Be back at 7:25.
All right, thank you.
So in the top left, you see how it says recording right now. I always pause the recording, so when it posts to YouTube, you don't have to scrub through like a 25-minute break. But if you ever come back from break and don't see that recording ... in the top, feel free to remind me, because I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten until 8:30 and went, crap, I forgot to record the second half of class. So reminder is always welcome on that. Usually pretty good about it, but just throwing that out there just in case. Okay. So let's dive back into our code. The other thing that you will need to tell me all the time is, Max, you're not sharing your screen, and I will mumble to myself and curse myself out and then start my screen share again. So we have gotten our first page open in the browser. Did anyone not get to see their hello world in the browser or need help? Okie doke. I will assume that everyone got to that. So now we get to dive into making some modifications. So I'm going to say hello world, and I'm going to say Max is here. And I'm going to switch over to my browser, and nothing has changed. And I'm like, all right, how do I get it to show Max is here? Well, if I hit that refresh button, it may pop up or it may not. It probably won't, and if it doesn't, you may notice that there is a dot up here. And give me 1 second to fix. I have a setting on. I didn't realize it was on. Okay, sorry. So you notice in my VS Code, I've got this dot up here, right? And if I hover over it, it becomes an X, but I've got that circled dot on my index.html. That is telling me my file has not been saved. So if I come over here to the browser and type something in here and refresh it, you'll see it doesn't change. It doesn't pull that up. That's because this file has not been saved. I know this seems like common sense, but I'm going to screen share with you guys and you're going to, it's not happening. I don't know why this code isn't working. It's not doing it. And oftentimes it's going to be because we have not saved the file. Now, we can configure VS Code to auto-save our file, but I don't like to do that at the beginning. I like to start you guys off with remembering to save so that you know, hey, I've told the computer it is now time to run this code. So if you hit the Command S button, you will notice that that dot goes away. It turns back into an X. That dot is saying, hey, the file is now, the dot goes away, the file is now saved, it's all up to date. I can come over here and I can refresh. And as soon as I refresh, we see that new content showing up. Hey, Max, wouldn't it be great if we could have the browser auto-refresh when we make code changes? It sure would, but we're a little ahead of ourselves. We will get to that in before the end of class. I will show you how to configure that so that when you save your file, it auto-refreshes in the browser. But for now, 2 steps. When you're done making your code changes, remember to Command S. When you are, after you Command S, go over to the browser, hit the refresh button. That pulls in your changes. So far, so good? Okey-doke. Thank you guys for having all of your cameras on. Makes my job so much easier. I will be giving you reminders as we go. But speaking of cameras on, it is time to do attendance. Head over to Canvas. Head into the attendance link. Fill out the form. Tonight's secret word is body. B-O-D-Y. And we're going to see why in a minute. Give you all a second to do attendance, and then we will dive into our first HTML.
It doesn't matter if body is capitalized or not, right?
No, it doesn't matter. I have a spreadsheet formula that lowercases everything and strips out spaces. Okie doke. Now that you've got attendance done, we are going to head back to our code. And if you want to follow along with this, you can. If you don't want to follow along and just let it all soak in, that's also totally fine. You'll find as assignments start getting, or as the projects we do in class start getting a little trickier, you'll find your learning style is either better listening along and taking notes as you go, and then trying to do it on your own after class or before the next class. Or you may find that you learn best by kind of coding along, and now you start to see why we have so many windows open. We've got Zoom going on, we've got our browser, we've got our code. As we progress, as we get more code starting to pull up, you will have a copy of my code on the screen, a copy of through the screen share, and there just gets to be a lot of windows. So don't worry, we will ease into that. But if you're feeling a little overwhelmed with the number of things on your screen, that is something that gets a little better with practice, but never totally goes away, having to juggle all of those windows. Okay, so we're in here, and this isn't really valid HTML. What is HTML in the first place, right? Hypertext markup language. What does that really mean? We'll break it down. Language, we've heard of different programming languages, right? Different syntaxes, different grammars, different vocabulary, but really different syntax is probably the most important thing there, right? Different symbols that we use to tell the computer how to work. Well, hypertext just means this text that has links in it, basically, right? But what do we mean by markup? That's kind of a really important part of HTML. We say it is a markup language because we take regular content, right? English sentences or headlines or images or whatever it is, and we mark them up. We basically surround them in these tags so the browser knows how to interact with that. When we just type text in, the browser is like, this isn't really HTML, but I kind of get what you're trying to do, right? I kind of understand that you want to just display that text. So even though it isn't valid, I'm going to let you get away with it. In order to make it valid, we have to talk about a couple elements, right? HTML elements and tags. We want to think of them as kind of synonymous. So in order to make a valid HTML page, we are going to make our first tag. So shift comma is going to give you a less than sign. And we're going to type in HTML and do a shift period and to close out that opening element. And you'll notice that VS Code dropped in what we call the closing tag. Well, everything between those tags we say is wrapped around those tags, is inside those tags. So if I hit the enter button, you will notice that it not only puts me in between those two tags, it indents me one level. Indentation is something that is really, really important. And as a beginner developer, it can be hard to figure out how to do right. So as we are going, as I'm debugging your code, when you share your screen, I'm not going to look at the error. I'm not going to look at what's wrong. I'm going to go in and I'm going to help you fix your indentation first, because subconsciously, our brain is processing that indentation as saying, I understand that because we're indented another level over, that means I'm inside things between this tag. Let's show you what I mean by that a little bit. The HTML tag is our first tag. We put all of our HTML content inside of that so the browser knows, hey, whatever I'm dealing with inside of here is HTML, hypertext markup language. Now, I'm going to do the two required tags inside my HTML. I have to do a head tag, which again, shift comma, HEAD, shift period for my closing greater than sign. And as soon as I type that in, it's going to put in my closing head tag. And when I hit enter, again, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to put me in between those two tags and indent me one more level over. Now, the head tag is what the browser uses to get the information about the page that isn't necessarily going to be displayed inside the page. Well, what do we mean by that? You'll notice up at the top here, it says index.html. Well, I don't want that to show index.html. If I go to google.com, it's going to say Google, not google.com, not index.html. And if I go Google a search result, HTML, you'll see that what comes up here is HTML-Google search. Whatever shows up in this tab or window is called a title, right? So what we're able to do is put in a title tag here and say my first page. Pause there. When I refresh in the browser, my page content disappears, but we do see my first page shows up in the title in the browser tab. So I'll pause for a second. We should have our HTML, our head, and our title tags. They should be progressively getting indented one level deeper because they're inside those tags. So we would say the title is inside the head is inside the HTML. Once we catch up to that, remember to Command S. If you've got a dot up here instead of an X, it means they haven't saved the file. Save the file, then go back over to your browser, hit the refresh button, make sure that you see my first page as the browser tag.
So will it be okay to think of it like as HTML being like kind of like, okay, so kind of like a family tree going on. So let's say HTML is like the grandfather, the head is like parent, and like I guess the title like the child. Is it okay to think like that, or is it like
Absolutely. Yep. Anyone not able to get my first page to show up or need a minute? Okay, so we're going to keep going. We are going to put our cursor after the closing head tag. What do I mean by closing tag? A closing tag is anything that starts with a slash, right? So that slash is basically telling the computer, I've started my head here. Anything that I put inside of this is going to be in my head until I hit this closing tag. And now I know that that tag is closed. It's over. So I am able to come down here, and after the head, I put my cursor at the end of that tag. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to do a new tag called the body. Any valid HTML document needs 3 sections, 3 tags: the HTML tag, the head tag, and the body tag. Well, if the head is everything that the browser needs to know about the page, the body is all of the content, the body of the page that is going to show up. So inside that body, I am going to put my hello world back and go ahead and save that. I Command S over here, I switch over to my browser, I Command R to refresh or hit the refresh button, and now I get my hello world back. Now, there's one more tag that we want to talk about in our page structure before we get to all of the different HTML elements that are available to us, or HTML tags that are available to us. That is the style tag. The style tag tells the browser, hold up, this isn't HTML anymore. This is CSS, cascading style sheets. We're going to start talking about CSS a little bit more tomorrow, but it's important to recognize that CSS, whether it's in a style tag or we link to the CSS, is an important part of HTML. So I'm going to go back over to my file, and I'm going to hit enter after the closing title tag. And I'm putting this up in my head because I don't want my CSS to be visible to the browser or to the end user. I just want to tell the browser, hey, heads up, there's some styling information that I want to do here. So you're going to notice the CSS syntax is a little different. And again, we're going to dive into CSS tomorrow. For now, I just want you to know that it exists. So we're going to put in a style tag and go ahead and hit enter. Again, that's going to put us in between it. And that style tag has told the browser, no HTML is going to be in between this. What's going to be between this is CSS. It's going to be a slightly different syntax. In CSS, we tell it, what do we want to affect? What CSS do we select to apply this to? So I'm going to tell it to select the body. And I'm going to put these curly braces in. Those curly braces are going to be shift and right above the quote key, below the dash and the period or the plus. And those curly braces are acting like the equivalent of our opening and closing tag for our CSS. So we do opening and closing for HTML, and CSS we do opening curly and closing curly. And there we use a property and a value. Basically, what are we trying to style and what do we want to style that as? So I'm going to say the color is going to be, I don't know, lime green. So I type in color space, or I'm sorry, color colon space lime green semicolon. And that semicolon is saying I'm done with this line. I have set a property. I've done a colon as the syntax to separate the property from the value. I've given you the value, and that semicolon is saying I am now done with that property value pair. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to get my text in line green. That was a lot we just covered. This may be common sense because you went through Code Academy. This may be blowing you by speed-wise. So we're going to take a breather here and go through this. If you have it working in the browser, go through and read through every single character. Do you understand why we have that character there? Do we understand what the slash is doing in the closing tag? Do we understand why we have curly braces? Do we understand that this body here is selecting out this body down here? If you don't have it working, that is totally fine. Work on it. And if you don't know why it's not working, raise your hand or come off mute and we can work through it.
So just to double check, the title is just for when like the tab is open, it's just naming the tab, right?
You got it.
Okay, and the body is the text.
The body is anything that shows up to the end user. Yes. And then the head is the opposite of that. The head is everything that doesn't show up to the end user, but still has useful information in it, like the title or some styling.
So is it possible to have multiple heads, or is it just like one head? No, okay.
One head and one body, but there is no limit to how much you can put in the head and no limit to what you can put in the body. Good question.
So the body doesn't need like the same tag notation and like ending tag, like style and title?
So body does have an opening tag and a closing tag.
Oh, but like within the style, I guess I was referring to.
Yeah, so the style is kind of an exception because anything between the style tags isn't HTML anymore, it's CSS.
Okay.
And so we'll learn more about this CSS syntax tomorrow. Today's all about HTML and seeing what's possible with all the different tags. And then tomorrow we'll get into more how do we style that and learn about these properties, like how do we know color is it and not font, right? And so we'll learn more about all about CSS tomorrow. Any
Not
questions?
sure if we're going to
Yeah.
cover this or at any point in the cohort, but so how come we don't put anything else in the head like the like doc type or any of the other like metadata like the encoding, or
The
is it just
encoding-
like is Chrome just automatically sensing like that it, or it's assuming that we're using a specific version of
Yeah.
HTML?
Yeah, you're right there. We will cover doc type and things like viewport and other meta tags that we will set there. This is the absolute minimum required for a valid HTML document. But as we get practice building these pages from scratch, we'll start peppering in other things that make the browser understand our code is more modern and is also responsive. So that's a good question, and it's definitely coming down the pipeline.
Would you ever have multiple body sections and multiple styles for each body section?
You are allowed to have multiple styles. You're not allowed to have multiple bodies. You are allowed to have as many divs or other HTML elements inside your body. And there are times that you would want to use multiple style sections. But we will work our way up to that. Any other questions?
My title isn't coming up correctly. I don't understand why.
Yeah, share your screen. Let's take a look.
All right, can you walk me through that again?
Yep. So share screen in the bottom of Zoom. And then if it gives you a pop-up of open system settings, go ahead and click on that.
I see multiple screens here. Let me see.
Oh, okay. So pick desktop 1 or desktop 2, whichever one has your code on it. and then share or double click on that desktop 1 or desktop 2. What are you seeing?
All right, here we go.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Yep. That works. Okay. So you don't have a title. You have a title.
Oh,
So a good pro tip for you is if that Explorer is in the way, you're able to just click on this file icon right here, and that will collapse the Explorer, excuse me.
okay. I see.
Yep. And then if you just click on that icon that I circled in the top left, you can just get that Explorer out of the way, which will make it a little easier. And then when you fix an opening tag, you also want to fix your closing tag. So make sure that you've got a closing T there. Yeah, take that one out. And then Command S to save. Head over to your browser. And you should be good to go.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. The way you guys is like his is like yours. The way it's set up on Visual Code Studio for you guys is completely different from me. Like my header, my title, my index page, everything is different. It's like all of my letters are lime green, and it's and it's
Share your screen. Let's take a look.
yes, sir. Can you see it?
I can. Have you?
It's his theme. His theme is different.
Yeah. Have you used VS Code before?
Yes, sir, I did. I was watching a free code camp video, but for some reason it had kicked from the actual like storage files on here, and it deleted VS Studio.
Okay. So VS Studio is completely separate. So those two programs won't interact. The only thing that you have is different is you have a theme installed. So if I can, it won't let me control your screen. So if you go, go to System Settings, go ahead and turn Zoom on. And fingerprint. Yep, perfect. Thank you. And now I should be able to. So in your settings in VS Code, you just have a theme set. And the theme that you're using is different than ours. So you've got dark modern, and the default is. Well, the default is dark modern.
He has high contrast on right below it.
Thank you. So we switch that back to dark modern, we save, and we come in here, and I think we might have to restart VS Code. And no, I missed a theme setting. Here we go. Default. There we go. All right, should be good to go.
All right, thank you, boss.
Of course. You can use different themes. Everyone likes their themes a little different. There's something to be said about using the default theme just so that my colors will line up with your colors. But you are welcome to use different themes if you would like. All different kinds of settings in VS Code that we will be going over in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and I had a follow-up question to that. So I don't know if you could review over your favorite extension codes, like I don't know in the coming weeks, extensions. I mean,
In the next
general
coming
for
weeks,
VS
we'll
Code.
definitely be
Yeah.
we will definitely be covering extensions. We'll be getting into live server and live share so that you'll be able to follow along with my code. We'll talk about code formatters like Prettier that will automatically fix your indentation. We don't do that at the beginning because I think it's really important to learn proper indentation. It kind of teaches you, makes you understand the nesting of elements a little bit better. And then all different kinds of extensions that we'll go over, like code blocks and different code highlighters, stuff like that. So that's definitely coming in the curriculum.
Sounds great.
Any other questions? Class is feeling slow now. Buckle up. Gets a lot quicker from here, exponentially quicker. All right, so let's start talking about some other HTML elements. So we threw hello world in here, but the browser's kind of like, that's just text, right? Everything else so far that we've done on the page, we've put in some kind of tag, and that tag has told the browser to do something different with it. We shouldn't really have just text on the page. So if we're putting just a paragraph of text on the page, we are going to use a p tag, p for paragraph. And we can say something like, this is one sentence. Paragraphs can have multiple sentences. And I can save that, come over here, refresh, and see that show up. But I can also do another p tag. So I want to get my cursor in the right spot. We are inside the body on a new line, but we're outside of this closing tag. So I am outside of the p tag. I'm going to make a new p tag and say this is a new paragraph. Well, why did we put that in two separate ones? Because you will see that when we go to the browser and refresh, we get what we would expect. If we told Microsoft Word, I want two paragraphs, the first paragraph has two sentences, the second paragraph has one sentence, that's what we would expect. We would expect there to be a break between the two paragraphs and the sentence to be on a new line. So that's exactly what we're telling the browser here. Both of these elements are inside the body. We will have two separate paragraphs, and what is in that paragraph is going to be between the opening tag and the closing tag. So if you're worried about typing speed, don't worry, that comes with time. You are using keys on your keyboard that you may never have used before. That's okay, you'll get practice with that. But hopefully this is kind of coming back to you from Code Academy. Might be a different order or a slightly different pace, but hopefully a lot of this stuff is clicking for you. Mo did throw out the link to the term sheet. If you are a vocab person, if you are a flashcard person, definitely check that out. And the daily outlines have everything that we're working on here, and as well as some links to additional resources like W3 Schools and some visuals to make sure that you understand everything that's going on.
Question. So I'm following along with the paragraph. I was wondering if we were going to get into commenting out code lines.
We will, if not tomorrow, sometime this week.
Okay.
I don't see it in my outline, but we'll probably cover that tomorrow. Any questions? Anyone not have their two paragraphs? Okay. Well, if we have paragraph tags, we've got to have other tags. One very helpful tag is a headline. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to do an H1, and I'm going to say big headline. And if we have an H1, it makes sense that we have an H2, right? So I can say sub headline. And if we have an H2, it makes sense we have an H3, right? Yeah, all the way up to H6. Well, why don't we have an H7? Because they thought 6 headline sizes is enough. If you need more than 6 different headlines, you got to figure it out on your own. So we have H1 all the way down to H6 and no H7. No idea how they decided that 6 was the magical number, but that's where we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I come over here, I refresh, and I see I've got my big headline and my sub headline. And we can play around with that. We could make my sub headline an H4, but remember, if we're modifying the opening tag, we also have to modify the closing tag. So I can make that an H4, I save, I refresh, I come over, and you see my sub headline just got a little bit smaller. Now I've zoomed in on my browser, so my sizes are going to be different than your sizes. This is what it actually looks like in my browser, but I tend to zoom in on things both on my text size and in my browser, just to make it easier for you guys to see it on the screen share, especially if you're on a smaller monitor. So if you're ever like, well, mine kind of looks like yours, but not exactly like yours, that's just because I'm zoomed in a little bit. So I just zoom in so it's easier for you to see it. Don't panic if yours does not look exactly like mine.
So that brings up a question. I noticed that H1 is like the biggest. So does it go down for like biggest to smallest? Like if like 1 being the biggest and 6 being like
The
least?
smallest. Yes. Yep.
So with that being said, like let's say if you want to make your header 2 kind of big and add like a paragraph text inside of that, is that possible to do?
Yeah, there's no limit to how much text you can put in an H1 or a P tag or really any element for that matter. So you can do that. We will also learn how to adjust font sizes in CSS. So it's more about thinking about this as a hierarchy, right? So when you're looking at my my daily outlines document, right, you'll see that I've got this week 2 as a heading 1, and then the day number as a heading 2, and then agenda as a heading 3, right? Well, why do I do that? That's so you understand the hierarchy, right? Of heading 1 is the biggest, the week. Then you get into the day level, and then you get into the contents of the day level. So when we're organizing our content, we want to think about that the same way, right? Of, hey, we're on a news website, which we will be building next week. What's my heading? What's the biggest thing? Well, you may think it's the article title, but really it may be the name of my newspaper. A heading 2 may be the name of the article. A heading 3 may be the author and the date it was published. And then the P tag would be all of the content in there. And with any of those, we can adjust any size or boldness or anything like that in CSS, which we'll be getting to tomorrow. Okay, let's start working on some different elements so we can see how they work. Well, what we are able to do is we can put a span tag inside any other text element. So what if I wanted to make the word new here a different color? Well, we're able to go in and put in a span tag around the word new. A span tag is what we call an inline element. It isn't going to adjust the sizing or the positioning or anything there. It's just going to let me target content inside another element. So if I refresh this, nothing has changed. But what this allows me to do is go back up to my style and say, hey, go find any span tag. Just like we found the body tag, now I can find the span tag and I can make that color red. I save, I come over here, I refresh, and now I've got my word new in red. Okay, let's pause there and break that down. I put an opening span tag here. I put a closing span tag here, but around my word new. Then I went back up to my CSS and typed in the word span to select. I did a curly brace and I said, hey, apply these styles, anything between the opening and closing curly, and I put the color as red. And pause there, let you guys catch up. what it should look like is this is a new paragraph and the word new is in red. You can see adding the span tag itself didn't change anything. What changed is when I was able to target just that span tag to make that color red.
So I noticed too when typing in, with paragraph being close to the end tag of span, that it's like pretty much like there's no space in between. So we have to make sure when we are making doing parentheses or even including tags like that, we have to make sure to double think about putting the space, because the the visual code won't recognize it. Like
Yes.
there's no automatic space it will put. All right.
Yes. How are we doing? Does anyone not have a Christmas themed web page going on?
I use chartreuse instead of lime green, but other than that, we're all good.
Yeah, I did aqua instead of lime green.
You'll notice our web pages get uglier before they get prettier. Don't worry, we will work our way up to pretty. All right, I'm going to rapid fire through some HTML elements here. Do not feel like you need to keep up with all of this. I will also be posting a link to the code at the end of class. So if you get to the end of class or you get to tomorrow and you're like, I want to play around with this, a copy of my code will be available in both Canvas, and I'll post the link into Slack once I have that set up. So don't feel like you need to follow along with me on this. And you'll notice that I do this in a lot of classes where I'll let you know, like, hey, I'm going at a speed that you can follow along with, or hey, I'm just going to rapid fire through some things here. So again, don't feel like you need to code along unless you are up for the challenge. And then by all means, feel free to code along. With that said, when I am rapid firing through things, when I say, okay, you don't need to follow along with me, that does not mean kick back, right? That means, all right, while he's doing that, if I have questions, I need to unmute and ask it. I need to throw it in the chat, or I need to raise my hand. You will notice I keep on looking up and down here. My web camera's up here. I've got all of you guys on my external monitor, and then down here is where I'm actually coding. So I can see you guys. So raising your hand, throwing it in the Zoom chat, raising your hand virtually, throwing it in the Zoom chat, or just coming off mute and asking questions. Please, please, please engage. Nothing is worse than getting to the end of a 3-hour class and tuning out 15 minutes in because you had a question that you didn't ask. I know 3 hours is a long class and we're doing it 4 days a week times 24 weeks, right? It's a long way to go. So when questions pop up, please, please, please ask them, even if it's a clarifying, because if you're thinking it and you want to make sure it makes sense, it's probably going to help another student out too. So I'm not making this web page because I need to learn HTML, right? I'm here just to show you, lead by example, lead by projects, and then you guys need to extract out all of the knowledge from it. So when those questions pop up, feel free to ask them. Okay, I'm going to rapid fire here. Line breaks are a little interesting. If I come down here and do 2 lines and then put text, another p tag, and say paragraph with space between, when I save this, you would think, okay, I'm going to have a blank line there and then more text underneath it. But when I come over here, it shows the exact amount of space. Well, what if I fight with it? What if I put in 2 spaces? VS Code is like, not going to happen. I don't get that space between. If I want a line break between one paragraph and another paragraph, I need to use the BR tag. Now, the BR tag's interesting because it's what we call a self-closing tag. there's not an opening tag and a closing tag, because a line break, there's nothing to go inside a line break. A line break is just a line break thing on its own, right? So what we do is, instead of doing opening BR and then a closing BR with a slash, instead we open the BR and then we put the slash at the end of it. Again, that's what we call a self-closing tag. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. And that's what gets me my space in between. Okay. Going to keep on going here. I'm going to rapid fire. There are 3 kinds of lists. There is an LI for a list item. That LI, we're going to say 1 list item and 2 list items. And if we put those in a UL, that stands for an unordered list. So an unordered list is just bullet points. They do show up in the order that we type them in, so they are technically ordered, but UL unordered list, that just means we're going to get bullet points. And if I copy and paste that and make it an ordered list, an OL, remember to change my opening and closing tags, I get 1, 2 as the numbers. Notice I didn't have to type in 1 and 2, just automatically showed them up. I am able to do things like, maybe between these, I would like a HR. An HR puts a little line between it, right? That HR, if you would like more information about it, you can actually click your mouse on there and hover over it. And it will tell you the HR element represents a paragraph level thematic break, i.e. just a line between. It's a header return, just separates out our sections of the site. A couple other things that we can do. One of the most common tags is an A tag. That A stands for anchor. We are anchoring our page to another page that we can open. So I'm going to say my very first link. And if I save that and refresh, it just shows up. And I'm like, well, that doesn't look like a link. What's going on there? Well, what does a link need to work? It not only needs to know what text the link is going to show up as, it needs to know where the link is going to go. Now we get our first attribute. What is an attribute? An attribute has a key and a value, but an attribute goes inside the tag and it provides additional information for that tag, that HTML element, to know how to work. So the key I'm going to use is called href, H-R-E-F. That is basically saying, hey, where do we want our anchor link to go? And here I'm going to say, hey, go to google.com. And if I can spell correctly, when I come back over to the browser and refresh, you will now see, because the browser has the href, it knows how to make that anchor tag work. And if I click on it, it will actually take me to Google. No, I'm going fast here. If you're staying up, that is awesome. If not, take a moment, go, all right, attribute. That's a new thing that we just learned. What's an attribute? It goes inside the tag. What do we use attributes for? Well, the only attribute we know so far is href. Href is what tells the browser where to go in the link. Okay. Another very common link, a very common HTML tag we're going to use is an image tag. So an image is interesting because it is a self-closing tag. We don't need anything really in the image, but what's the most important thing in an image? Well, the source of the image. Where are we going to display that image? So I am going to go to a website called unsplash.com. Unsplash is a really great website for getting royalty-free images, because we aren't allowed to just go on Google, find an image we want to use, and use it. That's against copyright, big no-no as a developer. So we use Unsplash to go get our images. there are lots of royalty-free websites out there. Normally we would download this image and include it in our files, but for the sake of just showing you how it works, I'm going to just grab this image and I'm going to copy the image address. We would normally download this, put it in our files. We'll play around with images as we get into more advanced projects. For now, I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to go to my image tag instead of href, which would make sense because, you know, that's what the anchor tag uses. Instead, we use src. src is short for source. I'm going to paste that very long link in there and save it. And when I come back over to my page, I get a very huge image showing up here.
I'm following along, and I got a little like broken photo icon.
Okay.
And it's not showing up otherwise.
When
I did
you
the copy link address.
Careful there. It's not copy link address, it's copy image address.
Oh, that would probably be why then.
I'm actually
Let me
going to
try
swap mine
again.
out because I did not a royalty-free one. Now,
There we go,
that
it worked.
image, that fix it. Cool. Now, my image is huge in here. We will learn how to shrink that up down the road. That's all going to be CSS. We'll get into that tomorrow. Just showing you different elements here so that we can rapid fire through them. We get a basic HTML understanding. Tomorrow, we will go through CSS. And after we get through all of CSS, on Wednesday, we start building our very first project, our very first thing that we can actually include in our portfolio. So that is the rate that we are going. We're going one day on HTML, one day on CSS, and then we unleash you into the world of projects. Okay, let me show you a couple other things here. I will share my code at the end of class, and tomorrow we'll also set up a live share so that you can actually, as I'm typing kind of Google Docs style, you'll see what I'm typing appear in there. So we will do that tomorrow as well. Okay, a couple other elements that I want to show you here. We have tables. Tables are really helpful for displaying information. Tables are kind of complicated because we've got a table head where we put the header information, and then we have THs. THs are basically the column content that will show up in bold. So I'll say col1 label and col2 label. And if I save and refresh and come down, you can see that shows up, but it doesn't look much like a table yet. Well, we can fix that by putting this in a table row so it knows, hey, my columns are in a row. And we also need to put in a table body. In that body, we can put a table row with table data of my first cell, my second cell, and we can copy and paste that for my third and fourth. And if we save and refresh, we can start seeing our table laid out. Now, that's a really good one because we just went 1, 2, 3, 4 layers deep. But you will notice all of our openings have closings. And because this opening lines up with this closing, it understands that these two things should be in one row. So we've got 1, 2, 3 table rows, each with a table data, TD, which is basically saying the content of that cell. And now we can see our table start to form. And tables are kind of cool because, and we'll learn again about CSS tomorrow, we are able to put things like borders on them to make the cells a little bit more apparent. But we'll get into CSS tomorrow. Last thing I'm going to show you, we can also do form elements. I'm not showing you all the HTML elements tonight. I'm just blitzing you with the most common ones, so you get an idea of what's available to you, what's built into the browser. Tomorrow, we get into the fun stuff of layout and styling all that's within CSS. So in a form, we've got some very common things, things like an input type text. Input is a self-closing tag. It has lots of attributes, so we could make that a number input or different kinds of inputs, an email input, a password input. So I will show you both of those. We can say text and password. When I refresh, I get 2 boxes in here. But when I click on this, I can type something in here. Over here, I can type, and you'll see it shows up as dots. Those are browser defaults. They're built right in, and we are able to control that with the attributes. How do I know what those attributes are? We'll look at W3 schools. We'll start learning about those different CSS properties, different HTML, not only elements or tags, but all of the attributes associated with them so that we can make the browser do what we want. The last ones I'll show you, we have select. In a select, we can have different options. And the option, we can say drop down number 1, drop down number 2. How does it know to show up all in the same drop down? Because it's inside of our select. Where is our select inside of? It's inside the form. How do we know that? Because visually, I've indented a level deeper. The computer actually doesn't need those indents at all. The computer ignores them. But while I'm writing my code, I'm making sure my cursor is at the right spot. So visually, I can tell you that my option is in a select, that is in a form, that is inside the body, that is inside of my HTML all the way up here at the top. Important for the computer to know where it's nested, not important for the computer to know where it's indented, important for us to be able to see that indentation so that we know that we're inside the right elements. May not seem important now, very important as we get into layout, getting our page in the right section. So anyway, if I can spell drop down right, refresh, and I get my drop down 1 and my drop down 2. And the last one I'll show you is a text area. And text areas are not self-closing tags. So I can say this will show up in a box. I can save, I can refresh. I get my little text area down here, and I am able to edit that because it is all in a form. I lied. There's one more I forgot to show you, a button. And we can say submit the form. That will show up here. If I click the button, it will refresh the page and bring it back up. I promised you we were going to take you to 8:30 every night. Going to come as close to it as I can. I will stick around for a couple minutes. I will also post a link to this code if you would like to play around yourself. But again, it's not important to get this code working. It's important to say, do I understand this code? Not asking you to be able to build this from scratch yet, but do I understand the concepts of nesting elements? Do I understand the opening and closing tag? Do I understand attributes and options, right? Or key value pairs, those things between the tags? Do I understand that if something isn't lining up, I may be missing a closing tag? Those are all things that we want to be thinking about, right? So read through the code, see if you understand it. In the next day or so, see if you can play around, make your own elements, get a table to show up. But not every class will be lightning speed. We'll give you time to play around and catch up to me. But this is what we're getting ourselves into. Reminder that the 30-second feedback form is out there. Feel free to provide feedback at the end of every class. Feel free to wait until the end of the week. Do not wait to have negative feedback to provide it. If something good happened, if you had a light bulb moment, share that, because I will often share those light bulb moments with the class. That can often help your light bulb spark someone else's light bulb. It is 8:30. I promise I will do my best to not hold you after class. So you are welcome to peace out. If you have any questions, I will stick around. Otherwise, have a great evening, and I will see you all tomorrow at 5:30. If you did not fill out the attendance form yet, fill that out. The secret word is body. Otherwise, have a great evening, and I will see you all tomorrow.
I'm gonna stick around for a bit.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you go back. Oh, sorry. I'll let you go ahead.
I just had a quick thing. Oh, well, it might be a quick thing.
Yeah.
I do like how VS Studio like auto completes the elements.
Yep.
But I noticed, like for example, like I noticed it back when we were doing the span.
Mhm.
It auto completed, and then I was like, oh, I'll just type new, but then I had the new outside of the span.
Yep.
Is there a way I can like either totally toggle that off or
You can, although I would not advise it.
okay.
So things like spans are going to be more of the exception than opening and closing tags. Because by the time we get to like the news website, we're going to have about 7 or 8 nested tags, and it becomes very easy to lose what opening tag matches with what closing tag. So if it really drives you crazy, you can turn that off. If you go to settings, VS Code, down to settings, and then do a search up at the top for like auto insert tag or closing tag or something like that, VS Code will let you turn it off, but I don't recommend it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Sorry.
No, good question. Other question?
I would like to go back to the code, especially for tables. I was trying to keep up.
Yeah, I went super fast there. So that is for tables, and I'm gonna work on getting this set up so you've got a link to access it.
So for TR, that's for like setting up the first table instead.
Yeah,
inside?
so table is the entire enclosing element. Table head is basically, if you think about a spreadsheet, how like the column names are bold up there. TR is table row. So your table head could have multiple rows, just like your table body can have multiple rows. And then TD is table data. That's basically saying move a column over for each one of these TDs.
Okay.
And this class wasn't live streamed today. I mean, we're watching it and stuff, but it wasn't recorded today to be put on YouTube, or
it is recorded. It posts about an hour after class ends.
About an hour after? Okay. Yes, sir. 'Cause I was just gonna go back and practice everything a little later.
Yep. Yeah, so it will post as soon as the recording is available, and then I will also post the code itself in the meantime. So you can see the code and go through it that way.
Okay, sounds good.
Forgot to get this
Is
set
there
up. Do that.
Is there a way to like if I like click to select like a word or even like highlight like a section of text that I can quick encapsulate that and then into an element? Or is that like an extension or something?
I know what you're asking. I don't have the answer to you for that. So if you
Oh yeah, what'd you just do there?
So if you do like, if you highlight it and shift and hit the arrow key, it will make it a tag, but then it will
Oh.
make that text that you have selected a tag.
Right.
So I don't think that's what you want. Yeah, I don't know. There probably is. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
Alrighty.
We'll learn about Emmet as we go, and Emmet is a way to create tags without having to use the arrow keys. So we'll show you that as we get later into class. But we like to get you comfortable with the syntax first.
Alrighty.
So I
What-
noticed. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I noticed for the element A, when I put the arrow before the href, it wasn't really like showing up like as like a link. Um, does it need to be before the href or?
So the tag has to be, where did I put my A tag? It's got to be an opening arrow, the A so it knows what element to use. Href is the attribute name or property, equals and a quote, and then whatever link we want to go to, the closing quote to match the opening quote, the closing arrow of the opening tag, whatever text we want to show up between the link, and then our closing A tag here.
Oh, okay.
So this is called an attribute property, or an element property. It is giving it additional information that we don't show to the end user, but kind of like the head tag that we tell the browser, hey, this is what I want you to do. That we put inside the tag so the tag knows how to work.
Okay. So it's okay.
Yeah, Max, I just have a quick question. I know some order matters, except like for example, the table and the T head and the TR. But does order really matter if I put the H1 or the P tag before the H1 and vice versa?
Yes, in terms of it will affect the order that it shows on the page, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not invalid HTML, it's just the order that you want it to show. So if you wanted a paragraph to show and then your H1, it's totally valid to have the H1 after the P tag.
Okay. And are you gonna share the code link on the chat?
I'm going to share it in the Slack and also post it in Canvas. I will have it in about 2 minutes.
All right, thank you.
This is another question. So for when you put the source for image, I was trying to see how did you get that exactly?
Yeah,
For
so I went to a website called Unsplash, and picked some random image on here. Yeah, I'm still sharing the screen. And then right clicked and I hit copy image address. So you don't
Okay.
want copy link address, you want copy image address.
Gotcha.
And then in the src equals quote, and then I pasted in that image URL.
All right, gotcha.
And we'll learn about how to work with our images, like our own images, and put in icons and all of that good stuff as we work through the class.
Understood. Yeah. I was gonna say, in T body. Sorry, I'm just like looking through it, and it's just a lot. So TR is like to basically separate, like you said, make a separate column. Label.
TR is table row, TD is table data, so that's the column. So TRs are going to push you down the table, TDs are going to push you across the table.
Gotcha.
After the Google link was applied there, my first link, that isn't always required, is it? That's just if you want to give it like some source behind the link to inform the user.
No. So if you wanted, you're talking about this part?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you take that out, it won't actually show anything there. You'll see, let me put it back. You'll see it's here, and if I take that out, the whole thing disappears. So if you wanted it to show up, you would actually have to copy this and have it in here. And then if you refresh, it would show that text.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Then if you scroll down to, so what text area does is just pretty much you can put a text box where you want it to be on the web page.
Yes.
Okay, and then the drop down, so option drop down is able to show up a drop down menu in the web page that the user sees.
The select and the option combined are what do the drop down menu. Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. I have nothing else unless someone else does.
Going once. Going twice. That code is posted in the Zoom chat and Slack and Canvas. So you are able to reference that after class ends. But otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow and have an awesome evening.